Hole in My Life, Chapter 1. Look straight ahead. The prisoner in the paragraph is me. The ID number is mine. The photo was taken in 1972 at the Medium Security Federal Correctional Institution in Ashland, Kentucky. I was 21 years old and had been locked up for a year already. The bleakest year of my life. And I had more time ahead of me. At the time this picture was taken, I weighed 125 pounds. When I took a look at my face in the photo, I see nothing but the poked mask I was hiding behind. I parted my hair down the middle and grew my mustache in order to look older and tougher. And with the greasy prison diet, salted chicken gizzards in a larded gravy, chicken wings with oily cheese sauce, deep fried chicken necks, and the stress and the troubled dreams of capture and release, there was no controlling the agony. I was overmatched. I might have been slight, but I was smart and cagey. I managed to avoid a lot of trouble because I knew how to blend in and generally shift through the days unnoticed by men who spent the majority of the time looking to inflict pain on others. I called these men skulls, and they were freaks for violence. Here we were, all of us living in a constant misery, and instead of trying to feel more human, more free, and unchained in their hearts by simply respecting one another and getting along, many of the men found cruel and menacing ways to make each day a walk through a tunnel of fears for others. Fear of being a target of irrational violence haunted me day and night. The constant tempo of that violence pulsed throughout my body and made me feel small and weak and cowardly. But no matter how big you were, there was no preventing the brutality. I had seen the results of violence so often, with guys hauling off and smashing someone's face with their fists and with the metal tool, a baseball bat, a rock, and all for no other reason than some imagined offense or to establish a reputation for savagery. When I lived and worked in the prison hospital, especially after I had become the extra technician, I was part of an emergency medical response team. I was called on day and night to x-ray all types of ugly wounds to see if the bones behind the bruised and bleeding flesh have been cracked, chipped, and broken. As we examined them, the patients would be telling the guards, I didn't even know the guy, or my greatest fear. I never heard him, never saw him. It was the lottery of violence that haunted me. Your number could come up anywhere, anytime, in the dark of night, while you slept in a dormitory with 100 other men, or in full daylight on the excuse field, while you strolled in the sun. Once in the cafeteria line, standing directly next to a guard, I watched a skinny black kid stab out some other blood with the dinner fork. He drove it into the guy's collarbone so deep the doctor had to remove it with a pair of surgical pliers. AIDS wasn't a factor then. The blood that sprayed over the food trays was wiped off by the line workers and they kept spooning up our chow. I wasn't raised around this level of violence. I wasn't prepared for it, and I never forgotten it. Even now, when walking some of Boston's meaner streets, I find myself moving like a knife, carving my way around people, cutting myself out of their picture, and leaving nothing of myself behind but a hole. Like most kids, I was aware that the world was filled with dangerous people. Yet I wasn't certain I could always spot them coming. My dad, however, was a dead eye when it came to spotting the outlaw class. He had never been in prison, but he always seemed to know who had spent time in the big house or who was headed down that path. In his own way, he tried to warn me about going in that direction. When I was young, He would drive the family from Florida back to our hometown in western Pennsylvania to visit relatives. Once there, he would troll the streets with me in our big wig and point to guys he knew and tell me something wicked or weird or secret about them. He killed a man with a pitchfork, Dad would say, nodding stylily towards some hulking farmer in bib overalls. Look at his hands, he's strong, SOV. Could strangle the life out of a cow. Or Dad would point to women. She had a kid when she was in ninth grade and sold it to a neighbor. He knew it all. He burned down a burn. He shot a cop. He robbed a bank. Dad went on and on. I was always surprised at how many people from such a small town had been in prison. And I was really surprised that after committing such despicable acts, they were back out on the street. They were a scary looking lot, misshapen, studded with warts and moles, and I was glad we were in the car. But not for long. He would take me to the Elks Club or the M. Batsville Hall or Hekla Gun Club in order to get up close and personal with some of the criminal class. He would order a beer and get me a Coke and some sort of food treat that came out of a gallon pickled jar of beet red vinegar, a hard boiled egg, or a sandwich of pig's skin, or a hunk of kielbasa. Everything smelled like a biology specimen, and with the first bite the red juice spurted out and ran down my chin. I must have looked like I had split my lip in a bar brawl. Then, once we were settled, Dad would continue to point out the criminals all the while, while using his Irish whisper, which could be heard in the next town over. He pointed out bank robbers, church robbers, car thieves, and shadowy second floor men, known for snatching jewelry from the bedrooms of sleeping homeowners. I began to imagine the entire town was some sort of visitor, experimental prison camp without walls, a punishment center where criminals were sentenced to living only with other criminals. Dad snapped his fingers. These folks jigged when the rest of the world jagged. And once you cross that line, there is no coming back. Mark my words. All this was my father's way of letting me know he was in the know. He had the dirt on everyone, and it was the dirt that made them interesting. At the same time, he made it clear they were damaged goods and could never come clean again. Dad's keen eye for spotting criminals of all stripes was impressive, but it wasn't perfect. He never had me pegged for being one of them. Ironically, in spite of all the fear and remorse and self loathing, being locked up in prison is where I fully realized I had to change my life for the better, and one significant way I did. It is where I went from thinking about becoming a writer to writing. I began to write stories, secret stories about myself and the restless man around me. While among them, I may have feigned disinterest, but like my father, I watched them closely and listened whenever they spoke. Then back in my cell, I would sit on the edge of my bunk with my journal spread open across my knees, try to capture their stories with my own words. For some paranoid reason, the warden would not allow us to keep journals. He probably didn't want the level of violence and sex among both prisoners and guards to be documented. My secret journal was an old hardback copy of The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, in which I spent hours writing in a tiny script between the tightly printed lines. I kept the book like a Gideon's Bible on top of my locker, and as far as I know, its true purpose was never discovered. Someone once said anyone can be great under rosy circumstances, but the true test of character is measured by how well a person makes decisions during difficult times. I certainly believe this to be true. I made a lot of mistakes and went to jail, but I wasn't on the road to ruin it like everybody else said. While I was locked up, I pulled myself together and made some good decisions. Like any book about mistakes and redemption. Oscar Wilde's Propoundis is my favorite. The mistakes are far more interesting to read about and write about. So I'll start with where I think I went down around the bend.